Welcome back, guys. We are finally going to start working on the Ferrari today, or at least kind of sort of diving into it. There's a lot of baselining that needs to happen on this car before I tear it apart and it becomes a shell of its former self, quite literally. So one thing I've learned early in my automotive career, if you will, is a rule that I find that I need to abide by, and that's get as many gears turning as early as I can. And I know that's kind of vague, but it's similar to getting as many irons in the fire as I can and getting them hot. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of aspects to this build that are going to take a lot of time. Things like a custom engine build, custom suspension, custom aerodynamics, things like that. I could find myself 6 months from now wishing I did a better job planning and it could hold up the build. And that's detrimental to momentum. Anybody that's built a car before has probably struggled with what happens when you lose that. And so planning now is going to prevent that from happening and keep this build from taking longer than it needs to. So what I want to do today is do some baselining for the car. I want to find out its width, its height, its length, its wheelbase, and its weight. I really want to know how much weight I'm working with so I can find out where to trim the fat and take all of these pieces of data and use them as I move forward and build this car. And what I think is also going to be really cool is I want to demonstrate to you guys at home just how small this car is. Photos and videos don't really translate the scale of this thing. When I put this next to the M3, you're gonna see just how tiny it is. I'm only 5'10" and it comes up to just above my belly button. This car is really small and that's gonna present some hurdles as I move forward in certain ways. So knowing everything that I'm working it with is paramount as I go forward. So let's put this thing on the scales, find out what it weighs and take some measurements and then maybe compare and contrast that to some cars you guys might be more familiar with so you can get an idea of what this thing really looks and feels like. Alright, so car's up on the scales and I do have a weight number now. I have one scale that's not actually reading properly, so I did off camera have to lift the car up, swap the rear scales and take a second reading and do some quick phone math to find out what we've actually got. But before I spill the beans on what the weight is, I just got a call from my buddies Byron and Khalil over at Bullet Performance, and they let me know that the dyno at their shop is open this evening and available for use. So we're gonna get to put this thing on the rollers and find out what it makes. And this is not something I thought I'd get to do before tearing this car apart. I'm really excited to get this bit of information. It's the ultimate form of a baseline. We're gonna get to take all the numbers, figure out a power to weight ratio for this car in factory form, and have some awesome numbers to get to compare to further down the road. So before we lose all of our sunlight, I'm gonna get this thing off of the scales and over to Bullet. We'll strap it down on the rollers and find out what kind of pathetic number this thing actually makes.
Saw the Instagram post. I kind of just want to go on there and post the exact numbers. I'll look smart.
Okay, so that's where we'll finish up. We'll leave it at 163. We'll call that a good number.
Yeah, that's all. 4 horsepower. Pretty good. 4 horsepower.
What's the torque figure?
It didn't read it that time, but it did 148 the first time.
148?
What's that? Where you going back there?
All right, so yesterday's dyno session went really well. The car didn't have any hiccups, it didn't stutter. It really didn't mind being pushed that hard on the dyno, which I was really glad to see. We kind of joked around and halfway expected it to puke its guts out because that's just how this kind of stuff goes. But it did well, it was happy. And the power figure, after spending the evening thinking about it, isn't as stupid as I thought it was. So our second run landed us at 163 horsepower. And at first I thought, that's nothing short of hilarious. It's a Ferrari, it's supposed to have horsepower to it. With that said, the 205 horsepower figure that this car has rated from Ferrari, if we give this car a 20% drivetrain loss factor, which probably isn't totally fair, but it's a standard figure, and if we run with it, we're within 1 horsepower of what this car is supposed to have. And that tells me that I've got a happy, healthy engine, and that's good because it's gonna make some other Ferrari owner happy to fix their broken piece of junk. I am not gonna stick with the FB1066 or F106BB, whatever it is, engine, the 2.9 liter V8. It's coming out. I want nothing to do with it. So I'm eager to hear what you guys think is gonna go in it. I've already decided, but I love hearing other ideas. What would you do with it if it was yours? Let me know. Before I dive into the weights though, I wanna talk 308s for a second. If you aren't familiar with these cars, there's a number of variants to them. The earliest years, 75 up through early 77, if I understand correctly, these cars were made in fiberglass, and they're known as Vetroresina cars. Apologies to any Italians if I'm totally butchering that. They're made out of fiberglass, and the weight reported on them is just under 2,400 pounds. They're really lightweight, and I would love to have gotten my hands on one of those, but we're talking about a $150,000 car, and this is not one. That's way out of the budget. So I've got a steel-bodied car, as most 308 owners do. From 77 up until 1980, these cars were carbureted and produced 240 horsepower, and with the steel body, they weren't fast, but they weren't all that slouchy. They weighed in at 350 pounds heavier than the fiberglass cars, putting them at, the mid 2,700 pound range. I think with a few other options and accessories that were added into the cars by that point, we're talking about mid 28s. This car is a fuel-injected car. It's a GTBi. These cars are plagued with Bosch K-Jet fuel injection, along with emissions requirements, an air pump, cats, a ridiculous exhaust, and they really gained a lot of weight. And that's part of what makes them just not as fun to drive as their earlier cars. Or the later cars, which came with 4-valve engines, which brought the power figure back up to 240 horsepower. So this is probably the most lackluster version of this car you can get, short of the Targa top. I bought a coupe specifically because I prefer the way that it looks, and I wanted the rigidity of a closed top car. And I don't want leaks. So this car, I was hopeful that it would weigh somewhere in the 2,900 pound range, and it seems like most of you guys did too. I asked yesterday for everybody to take a guess at what they thought the power figure would be and what they thought the weight would be last night, and I was way off. Almost everyone was way off. None of us were anywhere close. This thing is a pig. I'm embarrassed about it. I'm disappointed. It's nothing short of awful. It weighs 3,132 pounds. I'm blown away. I can't believe it's that heavy, considering the size, the packaging of this car. It's beyond any expectation I had in the wrong way, wrong direction. It is unbelievably heavy. We've got Big Bird here, and we need to find our way down to Tweety Bird or something. I was really hopeful that when I was finished, this car was gonna weigh sub 2,500 pounds. I don't think there's any way that's gonna happen now. I know that I can lose a lot of weight from the engine being a V8, a 2.9 liter V8, with a ton of smog equipment, as I mentioned, and the exhaust. There's also a lot of luxury components in this car, heavy seats, air conditioning, radio equipment, stuff like that. And even things like these bumpers on this car, they're like 90 pounds according to the internet. They're like a really dense, heavy impact rubber. So lots of places I'm gonna start finding weight. I'm hopeful that it'll be 2,800 pounds all finished up. We're gonna have to see. But no matter what, I've got my work cut out for me in order to bring this thing down from where it's at now. It's as heavy as an E36, and that's a significantly more modern car and significantly bigger. So we're gonna have to see how that goes. Last but not least though is the dimensionality of this thing. I've parked it next to the M3. I wanna show you guys what it really looks like next to another vehicle. So I'm gonna grab the camera, do a bit of walk around, and gather these last bits of information that I talked about previously. The wheelbase, the roof line, things like that. So comparing these two cars is pretty interesting. In terms of length, they're really similar to each other if we include the big bumpers on the Ferrari. If we take those off, we're talking about a 6 to 8 inch difference in overall length. Width-wise, they're not too far apart. I'm gonna look up the actual numbers that I can find online for those, truth be told, because I'm too lazy to get the toe plates out right this moment. And then for roofline height, that was something that was interesting to me. It's not really helpful for much of anything, but I wanted to know what that delta was, and especially once I see it grow. So what's surprising is the roofline of the Ferrari is a complete 7 inches shorter than the M3. And the M3 is lowered from stock. And so that number is gonna grow because the Ferrari's got a long way to come down. It's kind of tall. I can fit the entire jack underneath it. So as it comes down, there's gonna be a big difference between those two, an even bigger difference. Last but not least is to thank all of you guys for supporting these videos so far, for the likes, the comments, the subscriptions especially. I really appreciate the support you guys are showing. And if you like what you're seeing and you haven't done that stuff yet, please do. It's supportive of the channel. It gives me a reason to keep pushing this stuff out and keeps this channel growing. I'd love to keep putting this stuff together for you guys, so let me know what you think. Give me your criticisms, give me the stuff that you like about it, let me know what you want to see. I think up next, I'm going to try middle of the week or first part of the week to churn out a shop overview tour. It's a lot different from the last time I did that, and I know a lot of you guys want to see what's going on in here. So we'll do that, see what other cars are hiding in the back, and I'll catch you guys next week.